Good morning, everyone. Here's story time for the day. What elephant this book is called? And I see an elephant and a little boy under him. This book is written by Geneva Coate. She's the author. Let's see. What elephant? Oh. It was a quiet day, a day like any other day, when George burst out of his front door shouting at the top of his lungs, "Help, help, there's an elephant in my house." A small crowd gathered around George. "Elephants don't break into houses," someone giggled. "But this one did, it really did," said George. "When I got home, there was an elephant sitting on my couch. It was watching TV and eating chocolate chip cookies." His best friend Pip shook his head. "Elephants don't watch TV, and they certainly don't eat chocolate chip cookies. You were probably out in the sun too long. Why don't you go home and have a nap?" "Maybe Pip's right," George said to himself. But the minute he set foot in his house, George heard loud snores coming from the bedroom. An elephant was sprawled across his bed. George settled on the broken couch. Elephants should never sit on couches. And since the elephant had blown its very big nose on every one of his single bed sheets, George covered himself with an old newspaper. "I'll go to sleep, and when I wake up, everything will be normal." But when George woke up the next morning, the couch was floating on a sea of soapy water. George heard loud splashing sounds coming from the bathroom. The elephant was in the shower. Elephants should never linger in a shower. "When I wake up from this very strange dream, but maybe I am awake. Maybe I've woken up." George wondered that as he fished out his prized teapot. By the time he'd mopped the floor, George was very hungry. But when he opened the kitchen cupboards, there was nothing but crumbs. All the cookies, all the peanut butter, all the bread, all the milk, and all the bananas were gone. George heard a loud burp coming from the dining room. Elephants should not eat cookies for breakfast. "This must be the longest dream in the world," sighed George as he walked to the grocery store. But when George came back, the elephant was sitting on his broken couch reading his newspaper. "Elephants can't read," said George. "This must be a dream." But day after day the elephant remained, and George just stepped around it. He stayed home and kept to himself. He ate little and slept even less, and he hardly ever smiled. Maybe there's something wrong. But he didn't tell anyone about the elephant again, not even Pip. After a whole week had gone by, Pip came around. "You don't seem yourself. You aren't seeing an elephant again, are you?" George pretended to laugh. "Elephants? No, of course not. Elephants don't live in houses. They don't sleep in beds. They don't eat chocolate chip cookies. They don't read the newspaper. No, I'm just tired." But then they walked into the garden, and Pip suddenly paled. "George, are you sure you don't see an elephant anymore?" "Maybe he can tell something's wrong with me." "Nope, I don't see anything." "Oh, no," thought Pip, "then maybe there's something wrong with me." For he could see right in the middle of the garden a large elephant, shiny with suntan lotion. He felt too embarrassed to tell George, so George and Pip chatted about the weather and pretended they didn't see the elephant. A little while later, their friend Maggie came by. "What is an elephant doing in your flower bed?" Pip and George pretended there was no elephant. "Maybe I'm seeing things. Maybe I've been out in the sun too long." And so Maggie sat down in the shade and stared at her lemonade and talked to Pip and George and pretended there was no elephant in the yard. It was a fine day that more friends and neighbors stopped by when they saw them outside. But everyone saw the elephant and pretended not to. They didn't want someone to think there was something wrong with them. Suddenly the silence broke by a shout. "Shiraz, I've been looking for you all week." A very angry little man marched towards George. "You, why didn't you bring my elephant back? Why did you hide my elephant in your house?" He flung his arms around the elephant. "I tried to," stammered George. "I thought," said Pip. "I didn't want anyone to think," said Maggie. And George and his friends looked at the elephant right there, and they each let out a huge sigh of relief. Phew, there's nothing wrong with us. And then they began to explain, and the little man laughed, wondering how anyone could not see an elephant. You must have thought you were invisible here, poor elephant, he said, hugging his elephant. She ran away because the circus hired a new talent, and my Shiraz wanted to be the only star. Don't you know you'll always be my biggest star? And Shiraz, which was the elephant's name, dropped 2 tears on her owner's nose. After lemonade and chocolate chip cookies, Shiraz and the little man walked into the sunset, side by side. Everyone felt a little embarrassed, including Pip. I'm sorry, Pip, I should have believed you, and I should have insisted, when he was politely interrupted by a high-pitched voice. Excuse me, gentlemen, which way is it to the train station? Surely it couldn't be the voice of a pink poodle carrying a poodle suitcase. Pip, Pip, did you hear that? Huh, said George. Oh, and that was the end of George having an elephant in his house. That's a sort of funny book. I think it was make-believe. Maybe he was having a dream. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story. Bye.